everyone. Good evening from London and hello from the US of A. I'm here with Dan. Hi, Dan.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Excellent, thank you.
That's great. And we hope everybody who's here listening is also in good form, in fine fettle. We are going to be talking today about your self-publishing life, how you fit everything you have to do as not just a writer, which in itself, as somebody who writes books, long form, it's challenging. We all know that. And then in addition to meeting that big challenge, you've also set yourself the challenge of publishing those books, which is a multifaceted challenge in and of itself, and one that calls for different skills, different practices, different ways of going about your life. So we are going to monthly discuss all the various aspects of that. How do you fit your publishing into your life without going crazy, ending up in a home for the bewildered, or just giving up and going away? And, you know, the whole point of doing this, I think, is to make your life better, not to give yourself endless stress, worries, and hardship. So Dan has huge experience in working with lots of authors and other creatives who meet these challenges all the time. So today we're going to be talking about finding your rhythm, which I think, certainly for me, was key, getting the rhythm right of the days, the weeks, and the months, so that what I was trying to do fitted in and had enough space around it so I could enjoy it all. And I used the word balance when we were discussing and setting this up, and got a very intriguing note back from Dan. I'm going to start there. He said, "I don't believe in balance. I believe in obsession." Explain yourself, please.
So the way I look at this is probably every writer listening to this is balancing the idea of self-publishing their book, writing it, marketing it. They may have kids or family, they have relationships, they might have a day job, they have health. The idea of balancing this is, to me, setting yourself up for failure, because it doesn't take much. It's a very slight gust of wind to throw everything out of balance. And what I find is that there's not enough hours in the day or energy in the tank to do it all as well as you want. So the idea of, I don't believe in balance, I believe in obsession, is the idea of giving yourself permission to do a couple things that you really believe in. So, when I'm working with a writer, talking to a writer, or in my own life, the first thing is always the idea of getting really radically clear about what you want to focus on. And I like to kind of put it all into one pot. But this idea that if you say, I really want to, publish and write books, and you get really clear about what that means, you also need permission to obsess about it. And the practical way that this works down is that maybe you need to say no to volunteer events at your kid's school. Maybe you say no to going to a party. Maybe you say, we're going to hire that house cleaner, even though I feel guilty about that expense because of how I was raised. It means, people are saying you've got to also do an audiobook and you got to also do this or that. But you know what? I'm letting that go because I'm obsessed with getting this series of 5 books into print. So it really is this idea of knowing very clearly what you want to focus on, and then really honing and focusing your energy on that. And I like the word obsession, even though I know it's a little controversial. A lot of writers I've talked to prefer the word passion. And I think that is adequate as well. If someone listening has a negative view of the word obsession, I totally understand that.
Really interesting. So many things there I would like to unpack, and we will. I don't think, actually, while I'm a big believer in balance, I don't think we're that far apart, really. And I think definitely one thing we can certainly agree on is, in order to do this, there are lots of things you have to say no to. So always in life there are competing wants. We can't have it all. It's certainly not all at once. Maybe you can stagger your pleasures and by the end of your life have done it all. But at any moment, in any day or in any week or in any month, you are going to have to select. And to me, creativity is very much about selection and commitment. what is most important today, what is most important over the span of your lifetime, and then kind of peeling back from there, back to a sort of a 10-year, a 7-year, a 5-year, a 1 year, a quarter, a month, a week, a day, and then right now. So for me right now, for you right now, we've made the conscious or subconscious decision that the most important thing we can be doing right now is what we're doing right now. And I think that's something that is a skill in itself and that you get better at as you go along. Is that your experience?
That's a great question. It's a yes and no. Because I think that I'm thinking of even the creative practice, like in the last year and a half, I've decided I'm going to finally learn how to play guitar. And as you go through the daily practice of learning anything new, one of the things you become really aware of a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months in, am I practicing the wrong thing in the safe habit that I know how to do? And how do you break out of that? How do you challenge yourself to stop practicing the wrong thing in the wrong way with the wrong narrative? And I think that a lot of us do end up in that trap, and that you get better at it when you start. To me, it's usually about collaboration. It's when you talk to one other guitarist, you realize how they do it. You talk to you go to a show and you talk to the guitarist afterwards, and it opens you up. And I don't want to just say you've got to break a mold. I think there's something about collaboration that gets people to get better because it breaks their comfort level, it breaks their familiarity, it breaks all these social habits that we have where we're like, well, I'm not doing social media as an author. I read this article once, it's all garbage and here's why. And then you talk to authors that published and you realize like, oh, they use social media. They don't think it's the greatest thing ever, but they made a couple good points that it's useful. Oh gosh, how do I hold these two things in check? I don't want to use it, but it's kind of useful. So I think that I agree with you, and I agree it happens usually when you're engaging with other people in some way.
Interesting. I also feel there are practices that you can as a creative yourself. I think very much in terms of, your core products that you're putting out as, in this case, as an author. It's your books or courses or whatever it is that kind of you're selling and offering. And there is the practice of kind of sitting down to do that, to do the writing or to do the publishing tasks or whatever they are. But around that you also need stabilizing practices that create some space and ventilation. So, for example, every morning, a group of us get together on Facebook Live and we do a meditation together and we do some free writing together. And for me, that keeps me honest. That's where I challenge myself. I find I am challenging myself in a way that I wouldn't if I just kind of stuck with doing the work. So you do need, if it isn't collaborate, it might be collaboration. And I know you're a huge believer in collaboration, and I think it is definitely, creativity is collaborative by nature. But I think there are also maybe times where solitude and that connection with your own creative process, your own creative flow, nurturing that in some way, having practices that nurture it. It could be walking. There are 1,000 things that it can be, and it's different for all of us. But there are certain core things that the research shows are very good, and certain kinds of meditation is certainly one of those. Free writing or some kind of expressive journaling is also not just for writers but for creatives of all kinds, and so on. There are these practices that for me, as speaking personally as a creative, and also in my observation of other authors, are really important.
Totally agree. I love that. Absolutely.
We have a question from Janet. Any tips on how to get your rhythm back after being hit by a hurricane while trying to sell my house and buy a new one? I hope a metaphorical housely hurricane.
This sounds like an actual hurricane.
Maybe it was an actual hurricane. Almost years gone by, things are not all fixed, but I'm closing on my new to me house mid-June. Okay, Janet. So perhaps it really was. I took it as a metaphorical hurricane there. So how to get your rhythm back after being hit by a hurricane, Dan?
So I like to put a lot of boundaries on it. So I think this is where it's nice to just get yourself creating again and give yourself a really low goal. So this is where you can say, I'm going to have a goal of writing every day for 30 days, or I'm going to write for 10 minutes a day, or I'm going to write 400 words a day. That's a writing goal. It could be something else if you're more in the branding, marketing, and publishing side of it. I would just set a lot of very artificial boundaries so that you have a pretty clear goal that doesn't sound scary, and that it's small enough to where you can kind of just kind of get acclimated again, because a lot of it's just kind of stretching those muscles. And then you come to the end of that, whether it's a 10-day thing or 30-day or 90-day, and you've built those muscles up again. Now you can say, okay, what do I really want to do? That's how I do it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love your, setting the bar really, really, really low. I think that's great. And I know people that has really helped. Janet has come back to say, yes, an actual hurricane. So sorry, gosh, that's horrible. And I think you raise a point, Janice, that has reference to everybody. Life springs surprises. So, we have our publishing plan or our writing plan or whatever, and then a hurricane hits. And of course, it isn't just the physical damage done by whatever, in this case, a hurricane, but it's also the emotional drainage. Our creative work needs energy, and when we are emotionally drained by life, when something comes in that's unexpected and difficult and challenging, a lot of our creative energy can be dissipated in that. And I think there is something to be said for having this space that we give ourselves if life is tough and challenging, in terms of the rhythm, that what we're trying to do in the time that we do allocate for our work is the stuff that is most nurturing for us. So recognizing that if something major like this has happened, that life doesn't just go on as if it didn't happen, and we have to make allowances for it. And that our creative work in itself, and I include publishing as creative work and not just writing, our creative work, we chose it. We choose to do it in the first place because at some level it's healing and transformative and nurturing for us. But there are aspects of it that aren't. There are aspects of it that we find more challenging, more difficult, and more oppressive. So to stick while life is tough, to stick with the bits of it that really feed us and look after us. So yeah, and I think to recognize that it can actually be a huge help in getting over whatever other challenges we have to meet in life as a result of the tough thing that has happened. If we see it as just one more thing to do, or another responsibility, or that we're failing ourselves or letting ourselves down by not doing it under trying and exceptional circumstances, I think we're delaying the time when we will actually get back on top. So hopefully between those two, that is helpful. Anything to add, Dan, before we...
It's funny. One thing I think about this, especially when it comes to the idea of like the publishing process, you have to expect that there's going to be roadblocks and failure. Right before we went on this call, I shared like a series of 5 tweets about this at Dan Blank on Twitter. But this idea that is the creative process, that if, there are things like a hurricane, which are truly extraordinary, that is just beyond the pale. But in general, less than hurricanes, I think a lot of us get taken off track and we get jaded and we get bitter. We get all kinds of things around it. And I think one thing I've learned is the creative process is full of this. Like, you have to expect that this is going to happen. Doesn't mean you have to be happy about it. But I do think that learning to weather it is like a skill that you are honing in the process. Because if we went to a conference right now, we talked to keynote author, published 40 books, you say, gosh, I'm having a problem. What would you do? My editor flaked on the last week and they stole my book. They'd be like, oh gosh, that happened on my 4th book, my 9th book, and my 22nd book. Like, it's not that they wouldn't have empathy, but they would be like, here's what you do when a close collaborator flakes. Because they've gone through it so much that they're not totally shocked by it when it happens. They've learned how to work through it.
And I think it is about that kind of returning and showing up, even when you're highly confused, upset, that you do just go and do the next thing that needs to be done. Keep it small, keep it manageable, as Dan advises. But just, if you don't, something else will come along next year that will derail. And Janet, I think you've had your share of misfortune. I'm certainly not suggesting there's another hurricane on the way, and there isn't. Hurricanes are definitely exceptions, but there are so many small things that can take our creative energy away. And, we were talking about this in the meditation group this morning. It's about turning up with this kind of spirit of inquiry. What's going on here? And noting it, and then noting your internal responses to that. And it's all in the response to whatever is going on the outside, be that life, but also the challenges that are emerging in the work as well. So holding that attitude, or regaining the ability to hold that attitude after great misfortune, I think, is what you're trying to do. And there is great reward on the far side of that. I think we become much more resilient and less swept around by the events of life. So we'll always be swept around, clearly, by hurricane.
Now we're back into the hurricane metaphor.
Yeah, hurricane actually, as a metaphor for some of the things, it's brilliant, because that is the feeling you have when something sweeps in life that you haven't planned and haven't expected, and all that energy, that goes in there. I think every creative needs, and for me, on our theme of today, every creative needs some method, some technique, some tool, or a variety of them that stabilizes, that allows you not to ignore or pretend what's going on isn't going on, but to function anyway, creatively, in the direction that you want to go. I know you work with people specifically on this, Dan.
Yeah, and it's funny, I think it hits into another point we want to talk about, just that schedule, staying to a schedule. It's funny, I have a whole system for how I manage my time, where it's very much focused on the calendar and on assigning a task to a period of time. And I find that what you tend to want are these two things that work together. You want a lot of structure to know what you have to do next, which you mentioned a minute ago, and almost be able to do it no matter how you feel about it. So I happen to use a calendar to do that. I understand a lot of people want a planner, they want a to-do list. You'll have your system to do it that's right for you. But if every morning you're like, okay, now I've got to figure out how to format this in my book, then I've got to figure out that thing on Instagram, like, do I feel like it? The answer is it's not even just the answer is yes or no. You're putting yourself, every time you ask that, through this journey, this emotional journey of, well, should I do? Well, do I really need to do it? Maybe I should do it later. I heard about this other thing that isn't like, it's like you're killing all this energy. And I find that you want enough to know, let me just move on the next thing. I have it to be Instagram. Let me spend 20 minutes on that, or an hour on that. Then I'll get to the next thing. And I like blending that, the idea of moving almost unemotionally from task to task, with a ton of flexibility. So I live by my calendar, but I'm always moving blocks around. And that is attending to the emotion a bit. There are some mornings where I'm like, my writing client is best served if I have coffee first. So I will move their little block to later in the morning. And I think it's just that balance is different for everyone, of not constantly negotiating with yourself, of picking a path. I need to do this, and then this, and then this. But then also giving yourself some flexibility to where you don't feel constricted by that. I feel like a lot of people I know are either ultra organized, like they have all their little systems and everything's a spreadsheet. And then there are people who think that that is the worst thing in the universe and everything is free flowing and I'm waiting for the muse to tell me when I should go to the food store. And there's nothing wrong with either, but I feel like there is like a middle way there where you can not always be second guessing, where you've got a bit of a path, but you also have flexibility in terms of the day of how you take on one thing after the other.
I completely agree. I mean, I'm the kind of person that a spreadsheet brings me out in a rash. I actually can't read them, and I'm not good with numbers, and I'm not, I'm just not good on that front. But there has to be some sort of bones and structure to things. Otherwise, as you say, you're making it up all the time as you go along. And, the great thing about brushing your teeth is you do it every morning. You don't think about it. If you had to think about, do I really want to brush my teeth? And do I want to do it now? Do I want to do it later? You could waste so much time on even such a small and trivial thing. And I think also locking yourself in is also a good thing. I mean, I spoke about the meditation-free writing that we do together online. One of the reasons I do that is because then I do it. I don't, the fact that we're there, we're online, we turn up for each other, makes sure that it happens. It's one of the ways that you can kind of make yourself do things. I remember reading Twyla Tharp talking about her routine. I'm not sure if I spoke about this on this program before, but she has a routine whereby a taxi driver, she talks about it in The Creative Habit. And actually, I would really recommend that book to any of you who might be struggling with setting up good creative habits and setting up good rhythm and routine. And she talks in that book about, that's it. It's a fantastic book. It's really great. She's a great writer as well as choreographer. And she talks about going to the gym every morning to, do her thing. But what sets up the habit for her is that she has a taxi that calls for her first thing every day. And to her, that's the ritual. The ritual is the ding dong on the doorbell and going down and getting into the taxi. She knows if she does that much, the rest looks after itself. And I think that's what it's about a lot. It's about getting that little thing that just ensures you're off, that you started. I was talking to a group of writers the other day about setting up a writing chain. So before you finish one session, just setting up exactly when the next session is going to happen, perhaps even leaving your sentence half finished so that when you come back, you know exactly what you're going to write next time. These little tricks of the trade, which absolutely sound, they are funny, but gosh, we can get really, really attached to them because they help us to get over this constant challenge with creative work, which is that nobody really cares if you don't do it. And, unless you have a contract or something and somebody's actually waiting for you to produce it, nobody is actually going to care whether you sit down and do whatever your tasks of the day are. So we need these little tricks and tools to help us across the line.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is this idea of knowing what to invest in. Because I can see Twyla, saying, why am I spending $12 a session for this driver to get me to a gym that's already costing me $1,000? I can walk it. In fact, the walk will be part of my workout. And then I can use that, $200 I'm saving each month. I can put that towards this. But like, you can rationalize it away. And I think often we rationalize away anything where we're putting money towards an experience, like an accountability or collaborative experience, versus like, oh, I have a book or I have a course or I have information, I have access. And I like that idea of kind of carefully investing, whether it's time or energy or money, in something that will actually get you to do the work. And that really can be, of course, we talk a lot about the publishing process too, of like, when do you hire someone to walk you through different aspects of setting it, getting things published, getting things edited, getting the cover designed, going through the marketing plan, the branding, getting the writing done. And I do think that a lot of it is like, I don't want to say tricking yourself because that's not quite the tone, but it's like knowing that little catalyst that will actually get you to write. And a lot of times it's not, I need to take another course on writing better. Because a lot of people delay that. It's just like, no, it's getting you in front of the screen and your fingers are doing this, and there are letters underneath those fingers. And the things that get us to do it, I love that taxi cab metaphor, or not the metaphor, but it's that idea of like what will get your butt out the door and zooming towards the gym where you can't even stop it.
Exactly. It's brilliant. The other thing I think is really important as self-publishers, particularly, but for any creative entrepreneur, is to have some understanding of the different tasks and the umbrellas that they fall under, and not labeling any of them pejoratively or negatively, but realizing that it is your creative responsibility to develop a creative relationship with everything that needs to be done in the job that you've set yourself to do. So I'm thinking of the old cliche of, I love the writing, but I hate marketing. And, we address this almost every week, I think, because again, since I spoke to you last, I've had loads of authors who've said that to me. As creative entrepreneurs, we're wearing three hats, and some of you are very familiar and have heard me bang on about this forever, but some of you may not realize that you are not just the maker of the product, of the book, but you are also a manager of your business and your business processes, the tools, the team, everything that goes on within that business. You've got to work on the business as well as in it. And then you are also the maximizer, the promoter, the person who lets people know that it exists, because probably nobody else will if you don't. So recognizing the different skill sets that are needed for each of those, recognizing where you fall down, what you tend to like, and not always going for that, but switching it up, and also developing your own way of handling the tasks that you may find challenging or you may think you don't really want to do, but mostly knowing that you need to do them all and that they need to be balanced, if I may use that word, Dan.
Yeah. It's funny, this weekend I spoke on a panel at the Biographers International Conference in New York City. And it was me, it was a self-published author, and it was a publicity person from Henry Holt & Company. And it was neat to hear the different ways that each of them answered questions, because he would, and they were both amazing. But the publicity from within inside a big publisher would say something like, "Oh, I think social media for authors is entirely a waste of time." And that gets a really good laugh in, a big auditorium in Manhattan. And he had a wonderful sense of humor. But then there's also the more nuanced way of, well, when you give up social media, well, how are you connecting with people? How are you meeting people? How are you being part of a community? And it's like when you choose to not do something, you're then forced to ask, well, if you don't want to do marketing that way, how will someone find out about your book? And I want to share this story because it was so great. The self-published author, she had gotten a really, really good blurb from a famous author, and it was so big, it got the cover of the book. And she said, I got it because I have a friend who occasionally bartends for this author. So I gave that person my, manuscript, and I had the occasional bartender pitch this author. And it's such a great example of the things that as an author you think are maybe beneath you or are spammy or are horrible. And she was lovely, and it worked out. She got the blurb. The famous author loved the book. It really helped her launch her book in a very big way. And it's one of those things where I can see everyone listening, including me and you, and be like, no, don't ask a friend who occasionally is near this famous person to pitch your thing for you. That's bad for all these reasons. You've got to, and yet when you open yourself up to it, that is literally how things get done sometimes. And that is the weird linchpin that stands between you and success.
Yeah, and I think, if anybody has any, by the way, specific questions about any of this or any particular challenges you're meeting yourselves, do put them in the comments and we'll address them before we go. I think that, what's so important here for everybody is openness and, being open to whatever is arising at the time. Openness is probably the core creative characteristic, I think. Not prejudging, not labeling, not deciding in advance, but actually being open. So she was open to that opportunity. She took it. It was there and she took it. And it's not, she never sat down and said, in order to make my book a success, I'm going to find somebody who happens to bartend for somebody famous and ask them for a blurb. No, that's not a plan you would ever, it's not something you're ever going to write down. But this whole world does move in mysterious ways. And when you are, looking for a solution, often it can be there, but you don't necessarily see it. You feel you're too busy, you can get caught inside, busy syndrome. And I think this is, again, to our theme of today, which is about that rhythm that you need to develop. It's got to include a lot of rest and it's got to include a lot of play. Otherwise, it's not going to be creative. Otherwise, you're just, banging it out there. And that's probably not working to the level you can work at, but B, you're not enjoying yourself very much. And the whole reason you wanted to do something creative was to feed that passion and obsession and all the good stuff. So balancing those three to me is key. And I think we don't give enough attention in our busy, distracted days to the importance of switching off, night rest, night sleep, but also day sleeps if we can, and lots of creative rest and lots of creative play produces lots of creative work.
I love it. I'm nodding in agreement with all of it.
Okay.
We have to have a future episode just about nothing more than napping.
Napping. Okay.
Definitely. Creative naps.
Done. Okay, we are almost out of time. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners?
No, I mean, other than this idea of what I think something we're trying to put out here is that this is what you do and it's what you work with writers on. It's what I do. It's what I work with writers on. And again, it just, it supports that idea of having a community, of having colleagues, of talking to other writers. No matter what your specific situation is, you have so many opportunities now to DM someone on Instagram, to email someone, to put a message here on Facebook. And I think that you should exercise that incredible power that you have to connect with people. So I'll just end with that.
That's lovely. That's great. And we do have a closed Facebook group. It's completely free of charge, not connected to AskALLi or anything. Go Creative in Business group. If any of you would like to Google that, you'd be very welcome. We set our intentions at the beginning of the week, each week, under those three hats of the maker, the manager, and the maximizer, what you're producing, processing, and promoting. And then at the end of the week, we actually talk about what we accomplished that week. And sometimes it's what we set out to do, and sometimes it's completely different things, and sometimes hurricanes happen, Janet, right? But we set the intentions again on the Monday. So if that sounds like it might be useful or helpful to you, you are invited along to that. And we'll be back next month on same time, talking about another aspect of the self-publishing life. So if there's something you'd like us to consider, do drop us, either of us, an email, and we'd be delighted to take up your suggestions. So till next time, happy writing and publishing.